Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you today, Ken?
I am well, thank you for asking, Rory. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm absolutely chuffed as anything that you've joined us for the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 203, and today we're going to be looking at three different topics in three different sections, starting off with our Counselling Foundations, where we're going to be exploring why ethics are important. Then we're going to move on to Focus on Self, where we recognize that you, as the practitioner, you are the heart of your practice, and Focus on Self, so important. And we're going to be talking about knowing your own attachment style, what that looks like, why that's important. And we're closing episode 203 by dipping into practice matters. That's where we look at what we may come across in the day-to-day running of a counselling practice. And today we have a guest lecturer, that's Karen Lawrence, who's going to be speaking about sex addiction. Met up with Rory. Really interesting topic, can walk into your counselling practice at any time. But let's kick off. We're talking in our Counselling Foundations about the importance of ethics within a counselling practice. Why are they important?
Well, I think that's a really good question, isn't it? And I think they're important because as practitioners, and I think in our own lives really, we have to think about doing the right thing, and ethics help us and guide us into doing the right thing. And there's different forms of ethics. For those of you who are interested in being scholarly, you can look at different forms of ethics. But in terms of counselling, we have counselling codes of ethics, and here in the UK, we have a number of ethical bodies, and they have their own sets of ethics, but they all boil down to the same thing: making sure that we are in service of the client, making sure that this is the client's agenda and the client's needs and issues that are at the forefront of everything we do, and not our own. And I think that's a that's a reasonably compact summary of ethics, Ken.
Yeah, very much so. So when you graduate, when you are a practicing counsellor, chances are you will join a professional body, and the professional body has a code of conduct, as it were, or a set of principles or ethics that we should work in between. And I guess in the same way as if we were working with a client, we would have a contract outlining what is on offer, what the boundaries are, so that the client understands where I guess the boundaries within which that they can bring their content. It's the same with us as counsellors. You know, having a code of ethics, it gives us a compass, it gives us a moral guidance of how we should show up, who we should be, what we should strive for. So ethics are not always something that you should have. Some of the ethics are to strive towards becoming. And I guess one of the very important reasons for ethics is to mitigate and monitor risk, and to provide some form of accountability to the client who is working with a practitioner. But that mitigate and monitor risk, really important area in the ethical framework, because as you've said, Rory, in every ethical framework related to counselling and psychotherapy, you're going to have non-maleficence, I think it's called, where yes, it is to do no harm. The last thing we want to do is be doing any kind of harm or damage to a person who may come in a fragile state to start with. So mitigating that risk, being able to monitor what that looks like, very important part of having an ethical framework.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And it gives us standardization no matter where a client goes. So if a client, goes to see a counsellor in London, or goes to see a counsellor in Edinburgh, or in Wales, the therapist should be, or the counsellor should be working towards the same ethical framework. And I'll pick up on what you said. It's not about being perfect. It's about striving to offer the very best possible service. And one of the interesting things about ethics, they're made up of a number of components. And one of the components is called utilitarianism. which is, I know,
Big word.
It's a big word, isn't it? Made famous, of course, by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, who are philosophers, and they basically were saying that the wider needs of society need to be put forward. That basically the greater good, and that forms one part of ethics, and also Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. In our house, we speak of little else.
I bet.
And
over tea.
Oh, yeah, when we're having our lunch, we speak of little else, and basically that to put it in a nutshell, that is the ethics of being fair and seeing the individual, and that fits in really to medical ethics and counselling ethics. But yes, it's about also mitigating risk. I think that if you're working within an ethical framework, you're less likely to do any damage to a client. You're less likely to cause a client distress. You're less likely to cause yourself distress, because obviously, if you go off the beaten path, if you like, and get into some difficulties with clients, you may find yourself, in front of an ethics board or having to explain your actions. So I like to think of ethics rather like a climbing frame. In my youth, we used to have a big metal box made out of scaffolding poles. Used to call it monkey bars, and you could climb inside. And if you're on the inside and you slip, you could only fall so far before you hit the next level and you could hold on again. However, for those young people who are on the outside, if you slip, you fell right to the floor and hurt yourself. So it is a framework, and I think thinking of it in that way is very, very useful. When you're inside a framework, you've got lots of things to hold on to.
I love that. And we're speaking about that framework, that ethical framework, those ethics there. And we started off by saying to protect the client so that no harm is done. But at the same time, reflecting on what you've said, Rory, there is protection for you as the therapist as well. It protects you because you have the operating procedures, really. And that's another thing, you can look to your ethical framework to establish your policies and procedures within your own practice. So the ethical framework can guide those policies and procedures. And there is, of course, the opportunity if a client feels that the counsellor has fallen short, or if they've been mistreated in any way, through a professional body, clients can make a complaint, and always the ethical framework will be brought out and the complaint will be measured against the ethical framework. And if you can evidence that you as the practitioner worked within the ethical framework, then you're going to be okay. It is there to protect you and your practice. And I think what's really important when we speak about the ethical framework is to read it on a regular basis, because they can be pretty lengthy. They can be pretty thick documents, but they're there for you and they're there for your clients. It is highly, highly recommended that when you contracting with a client, that you may mention your professional body. You may mention that you are working to an ethical framework, and that you would make that ethical framework available to that client, either in an electronic format or in a printed version, if that is appropriate for your practice. But it's a good idea to know what it is that you're handing over in depth. And I know, Rory, you at one stage had the ethical framework next to your bed, I believe it was, and you just read a paragraph here and there as you went along. You don't have to eat it all in one big go. Yes,
I had it on my bedside table, and it's interesting, Ken. I think that brings up an interesting point. In those days, I'm a member of the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy, and the BACP framework I worked to in 2004, 2005, when I first qualified, was sometimes referred to as a bit woolly. The latest iteration, which was 2018, as this broadcast is made, is a little bit more precise, and it uses terms like "we must" and "we should."
Yeah,
and we would always. Which means that if you look at the framework, where it says we must and we should, means you should be doing it. And there is other parts of the framework where you could take a view as a practitioner, you could take a view, you get a little bit more leeway as long as you can justify it ethically. But yes, it is now really a very, very substantial document, as is the framework from the National Counselling Society, and the UKCP, the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy, has their own. That's a little briefer, I have to say, but all of the ethical bodies have also sub-documents. So the ethical framework is not the beginning and the end. There's ethics in terms of being on social media, working with children, that type of thing. So there's lots of sub-documents that you can have a look at. But yeah, it's a really interesting part of our profession, and one that, as Ken said, you need to engage with. If you've not looked at the ethical framework, you should be. It's like when you drive. How often do you look at the highway code? But you should.
Yeah, specifically when things are changing, as you rightly mentioned there, Rory. The BACP framework that you referred to, last updated in 2018, came with some significant changes. And it's good to revisit the framework, check that. And I guess another reason for ethics is they can guide us in what training we could be doing. They can indicate that we may need some training in a certain area. You've mentioned some of the musts and shoulds from the new framework, or the latestly updated framework from the BACP. You may see something there and go, well, actually, I don't fully understand that. And it would maybe around, well, whatever topic it is, it can give you an indication of there's an area of CPD I would like to dive into to fully understand that. If we look at the ethics of protecting a person's information and data and not breaking confidentiality. And we look at specifically here in the UK, a new legislation that came in just a few years back called GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, which kind of indicates that if you have any kind of electronic data held, and that is a client's data, that you have to be handling that data in a certain way. And here again, you may look to that and go, well, what do I need to do here? And it would indicate an area where one would train. It's almost like a torch that would shine in a light in an area where you look at something and go, don't fully get that. I know I have to do it. I'm going to train in that area. So I think it's good as a guide, as a compass, as a protective frame for us as the practitioner, for our clients. It offers, I guess, a standardization where all practitioners working within that professional body to that framework would be expected to be working similarly, I guess. I mean, they'd have their own practice style, but similarly from an ethical standpoint. And of course, ethical frameworks differ from organization to organization, but they tend to also be the same. So it's different but the same. In other words, the underlying principles will be the same, but the wording may differ slightly. And one of the tasks called upon students, of course, during study is to compare and contrast ethical frameworks to have a look at them. So you were mentioning the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, BACP. I have in front of me here the National Counselling Society Ethical Framework, working towards the good of clients, doing no harm, being trustworthy and responsible. And then, of course, they put the big word in there, fidelity, respect for the dignity and the rights of the client, autonomy, justice. There's some lovely words, I think, in ethical frameworks, and I like it. And I must say, when I was studying and I was looking at ethics and I was looking at ethical frameworks, it gave me not just a framework for my practice, it kind of gave me some ideas for a framework of my life and who I want to be. And it made me, I guess, realize that I operate in my daily life from a set of ethics. And it challenged me to work out what those ethics are. And I'm much happier having that framework there. I think there's a lot of comfort in it, Rory.
Oh, I think there is. And one of the main reasons that we have ethics is to stop tribalism. I think that if you have an ethical framework, an agreed set of principles, you don't get, or you shouldn't get it. It may not always be the case, but what you don't get is tribalism or inward looking. You're always outward looking. You're always looking outwards towards the framework. And I'll pick up on the point you made about it impacting on your life. It's had a huge effect on my life. I'm more thoughtful about interactions I have and things like confidentiality. There was something that happened the other day where someone I knew was talking about someone else's data, and I'm thinking, no, don't be saying that. Someone else's data. And I kind of said, in a very thoughtful way, maybe that person wouldn't really want that information shared because that's private to them. So it can make you a little bit pious, I think. But doing the right thing can sometimes be seen like that. And ethics, if we can sum it up in a neat phrase, is doing the right thing.
Like that. I think that's taking everything that we've just said, putting it into. We could have done this episode just saying ethics, doing the right thing. Right. Moving on to the next topic. Rory has provided a super duper handout. If you're interested in this topic, you want to have a think about it, you want to discuss it with colleagues, if you're a student, if you want to kind of look deeper into this, head on over to Counselling Tutor. It's counsellingtutor.com. That's our mother website. And right on the top bar, just click on podcasts, because this is a podcast, and select episode 203, because that's this episode. Right on that page, you will find a download, little overview of what we've spoken about today, and you can download that, have it for your reference. But we hope that has been an interesting topic for you. And we now move on. We move on to our focus on self, recognizing that you are the practitioner, you are the heart of your practice. Know your attachment style. Wow, this is important, this. And interestingly enough, Rory, it's not taught on all counselling training courses.
No, it's not. It should be. I think that it should be. I know it's very difficult for tutors to fit in curriculums and what's being taught. But I can remember one sunny June afternoon with the sun streaming through the windows of the classroom I was in. We were in a kind of 1970s block. And our tutor said we're going to talk about the work of John Bowlby and attachment. And by the end of it, there were lots of people who were literally stunned. It was like not just a light bulb had opened, but someone had put the spotlights on. And what's really interesting, a lot of us, and that includes myself, realised why relationships we've had were so difficult for ourselves and others. And it was the beginning of a process for me of looking at A, why I had the attachment style I had, and B, trying to kind of work out how I could repair it. And I have to say, it's been pretty much a 20-year journey on that, because your attachment style is how you trust others. It's how you trust and see others in your life. And if you don't have a strong attachment style, it becomes very difficult. It becomes difficult for you and it becomes very difficult for other people. And I think you're right, Ken, it should be a mandatory module. So if there's any awarding body people out there listening, get your pen out and put it in. It should be a mandatory module, because I think that it comes up not only in life, but it also comes up in the therapy room. If you meet someone with a particular attachment style, it might very well trigger your own. And in specific cases, those who work in schools and colleges, because when you go back to working in a school, you're literally going back in a time machine. You're probably going to be taking those transferential things from your life at school and your younger life into the therapy room, because you're surrounded by it. It happens everywhere. And you may meet clients who trigger your own attachment style. And when we're talking about attachment styles, we're talking about, as I say, how we trust people, Ken, isn't it? It's about how we trust and how we conduct our relations with other people.
Yeah, and the theory kind of suggests that our attachment style is formed when we are very young. As children, will make a not a conscious decision, but it's almost like a little bit of computer code, hard code that gets written of how we are going to interact with the world. And it can come from our experiences of being quite young. Were our primary caregivers trustworthy? Were they not? Did they let us down? And we will make a view on the world from a very, very, very early age that we're maybe not conscious at the time we're making. And we maybe act in a way that, I guess, aids our survival at that time. And as we go on into later life, we keep on repeating out that hard code without knowing that it's even there, and repeating that on. So if you maybe had an attachment style where the primary caregivers did not show themselves to be trustworthy to the child, and the child would then look and go, you know what, I can't trust anybody, I can only rely on myself. And then later on in life, adopt things like, oh, you can't trust anybody to do anything. If you want a job done properly, you've just got to do it yourself. And it would hamper or, I guess, change the way that person would interact with and engage in life. And they're acting from a position that was locked in as a child. And as you said, Rory, you know, this can be pretty tricky to shake. And there are some that say you cannot shake it, that your attachment style is your attachment style. It's locked in. You can work with it. You can understand it. You can put processes in place to kind of deal with it. But in times of great stress, you will revert right back to that underlying attachment style. And you know what? It's pretty true in my life. I like to think of myself as a person who's undertaken a significant amount of personal development, but there are so many times where I find myself acting from my attachment style again and again and again, despite trying not to.
Yes, I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It is a subconscious process. And I was just laughing because kind of myself, I think I have the same attachment styles, or I know we have the same attachment styles, and it is a subconscious process. And what's really, really interesting, and I think this is something that is really, really important. Sometimes attachment styles and autism can get really confused. And a few years ago, colleagues in CAMS in Coventry produced something called the Coventry Grid. And the Coventry Grid is literally a graphical representation of the difference between someone with difficulties with attachment and someone who has autism. Because at the time when they were working with children, they really, really struggled. So sometimes someone could have what looks like an attachment style, but actually it may be a presentation within their autism. So, you know, we'll put a link into the Coventry Grid. You can find it on the internet, but it's really, really interesting. And yes, it takes time to work through. And it also links in very much to Rogerian theory that all behavior is goal directed. If the message you've got is you have to do it yourself, and the only person you can trust is yourself, therefore that is your goal.
Yeah,
that's your goal.
Yeah. And I mean, we went into this speaking about knowing your own attachment style. It's important to maybe recognize an attachment style in a client that may come in, and we've done podcasts on that before, but looking to you as the heart of your practice, knowing what your attachment style is empowering, because it is a subconscious process, I guess. Knowing that it is there, once it is seen, it can take some of the power out of it. It can at least give you the opportunity to work with that, do some development around it. And there are 5 different attachment styles. The first one is called secure attachment. And secure attachment, the theory kind of indicates that within secure attachment, the child would have had a balanced life with the parents. Parents would have been there, or the primary caregivers would have been there when they were hungry and they needed food. Food would have been given. When they needed protection and they were crying, comfort would have been given, protection would have been given. And the adult would grow up with what is known as a secure attachment style. And that secure attachment style means that they would view the world as kind of an okay place to be, that if somebody disagreed with them, that would be okay. They wouldn't see that as hostile or that as a threat. They would kind of look to that person and go, well, you know what? You can have your opinions. That's okay. I can have my opinions. They differ to you. We can still be friends. Everything's fine. And that is kind of a very, very basic pencil drawing of a secure attachment style. Then we have the anxious, insecure attachment style. And this may be... the theory kind of might suggest that as a child, this person may have felt that they were let down, or maybe something went wrong in their life. Maybe there was a death of a primary caregiver. Maybe there's alcoholism, drug abuse. Something could have been going on within the person's life, and the person themselves feel that they bear some responsibility for this, and they go on into their life being really insecure, not okay within themselves. If you tell me I'm okay, if you say to me, oh, Ken, you did really well in that, then I go, oh, did I? Oh, that's okay then. I need you to reinforce me to make me feel okay. That is kind of, again, a very, very basic pen drawing of an anxious, insecure attachment style. Do you want to walk us through avoidant insecure, Rory?
Yes, avoidant, there's different forms, but avoidant insecure is where you would try to avoid people. It's a basis of trust. You don't trust people, and you could use a TA term. It might be, I'm okay, you're not okay. So you view the world as people have not been okay, and you find it harder to trust, maybe harder to form relationships in adulthood, and that would be a typical view of that style. And then, of course, you get what's called ambivalent attachment, where you are pushing and pulling, where you need lots of affection, and then when you get it, you can't handle it, and then you're being pushed. You push that person away. And it's really interesting, those with avoidant and dismissive attachment styles and those with insecure attachment styles sometimes gravitate to each other. I was talking to a therapist, and they were saying that they see a lot in their couples counselling where one has ambivalent attachment, one has avoidant dismissive attachment, and it completely plays out. The more the person with the avoidant attachment is avoidant, the more the person with the ambivalent attachment tries to elicit a response, and back and forward it goes. And then finally, in the late 80s, I think it was Schaefer and Emerson identified something called disorganized attachment. And disorganized, you could say, if you wanted to sum it up, is you're not okay and I'm not okay. And children who come from chaotic homes, or maybe they've had to be the primary caregiver to their parents, don't feel okay in themselves and don't feel okay with others. And there's a scale of this, because they can then go on to what's called reactive attachment, where they may become very, very angry and lash out. And those colleagues who work at in children's services may see that with children who've come from very difficult backgrounds. But I'll tell you what else is interesting, Ken. This is something that's a perennial topic in our Facebook page. It comes up again and again and again. And if you're not a member of our Facebook page, quick plug here, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll see us. We're a closed group, but click on, knock on the door, and our moderators will let you in, and you can join a group of thousands upon thousands of people who are interested in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. They come from different disciplines, some students, some people are qualified colleagues, some people are supervisors, there's a smattering of teachers in there, all talking about the world of counselling and psychotherapy, and attachment comes up so much.
Very, very much so. Yeah, I love it. I love these topics. I love this focus on self as the heart of our practice. And the one thing I realize as we're going through these topics, Rory, is that there's a lot of work when it comes to self-development and self-care. It's a full-time job being a therapist. And it's a full-time job kind of keeping ourselves okay and examining all the aspects of self. And I think that is wonderful, because it just brings richness to life. So we hope that you find these topics of interest, and we challenge you, I guess, Go and have a look at it. Talk about it. Speak to your colleagues about it. Go and have a look at the link that Rory's going to provide in the show notes. And of course, you can get that by going to counsellingtutor.com, click on podcast, episode 203, and all the show notes are there. So moving away from attachment style, knowing our own attachment style, into practice matters, where we look at what may walk into our therapy room, aspects of running a practice. And I think this is an interesting topic, and maybe one that certainly make my cheeks go a little red just speaking about it. It's talking about sex addiction, and we got to have these conversations. We've got to be able to go there. I think when I was training under you, Rory, so many decades ago, remember you saying that the client can only go. Not that you're old, not that we're both old. No, there's none of that going on here. The client can only go as far as the counsellor can go, and if there are areas that we are all, you can't look at that, but then we can't go there with the client either. And Rory, I know you met up with Karen Lawrence on this to speak about sex addiction.
Yes, I met up with Karen Lawrence. She did a fantastic lecture for the Counsellor CPD Library. I have to say, I was the duty presenter on that day, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant, so enlightening, so adult in presentation. And we caught up with Karen, who gave us an overview of sex addiction and what is in that fantastic lecture. And this is what she had to say.
Practice matters.
And we welcome Karen Lawrence, who's done a fantastic lecture in the Counsellor CPD Library on sex addiction. So, Karen, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rory. It's very nice to be here.
Now, sex addiction is an interesting topic, and we spoke off air about it before we recorded the podcast. And one of the interesting things that's piqued my interest is there are some myths around sex addiction, aren't there?
Yeah, there certainly is. Even in 2021, there's still lots of myths around sex addiction, and various views about what sex addiction is and what it isn't, and whether it actually exists.
So yes, so there's the idea that it may not actually exist at all. In which case, my next question is, what would you say? How would you describe clients who are preoccupied to the point of distraction with sex?
Well, this will probably come through in the CPD lecture, but there are 4 criteria in which to base an assessment on sex addiction. And one is that people are preoccupied and out of control. They've tried many times to stop and can't stop. There's an escalation of the behavior of more and more and more. And also the important one is the function. It's why it's there in the first place. Yeah,
so it sounds to me like there's a structured approach to this. It's not just taking maybe it's on face value. It is about having some set criteria to kind of make an assessment, like we would with all clients. We assess, don't we, what's going on for clients, and you would have to make an assessment and work out if sex addiction is or a preoccupation with sex is important. I am interested in the blockages maybe to therapists a client may see a therapist and then they may mention sex or pornography usage, but the conversation stops there because the therapist can't kind of carry on the conversation. It's a blind spot to them. Is that something that happens a lot, do you think?
Yes. Well, I'm almost a practitioner of 30 years, and I've been working with sex addiction from 2007. And I have had a number of clients that have come to me having previously had therapy and sometimes even long-term therapy. And there hasn't been a conversation about sex and porn addiction with their therapist, or the client has had the courage to raise the idea that they're watching pornography, but the conversation hasn't gone any further. And that can be down to a number of factors. And one is that it's not to underestimate the magnitude of the shame that the client carries in trying to seek for help with sex, porn addiction. So shame silences people. And also, if they can talk about it, then sometimes it's the practitioner's own responses or own attitudes to sex and porn addiction that might become difficult. Or they don't know how to continue the conversation. They don't know how to progress it, what to ask. And one of the things in the CBD is some very nice questions about how you can progress this conversation. And in doing so, there's a little case study at the end of drawing the knowledge and the questions together to help practitioners to be able to do this.
Yes, I've always believed in the adage, and I used to say this when I taught, is that the client can only go as far as the counsellor is willing to go themselves. If there's a place that the counsellor can't go, then obviously if the client discusses something and the counsellor can't go there, it just stops, doesn't it? It's like going for a walk and I want to go up that hill, I can't climb that hill. Well, we'll just stop and go in another direction. I'm interested. Do you think that is something about counsellor training, or just it might be something that needs to be picked up in individual therapy to explore, to help explore, therapists' views of sex, to help them be more open or more accommodating with clients?
I think it actually could be a bit of both the training and in their own therapy. And there's some questions that to invite counsellors to reflect on. What are their attitudes and reactions to sex and porn addiction? Where does that come from in relation to their own childhood and adult experiences, and also what's going on there outside in society and culturally, society's attitude to sex and porn addiction, and also to sex and porn generally.
Yes, because it's interesting. You said earlier when we were talking before we made the recording, you've been done this for a number of years. Do you think that therapists' attitudes may have changed in the arc of time you've been practicing?
Certainly, yes, because culturally and society attitudes change as well. And in thinking, I'm pretty old, but in thinking of younger practitioners now and the digital age, pornography has become almost viewed as a everyday entertainment now, children and young people are very well aware of it, and young adults now view it as almost as recreational. So attitudes have changed now, and society has become, and rightly so, very, very open and progressive, and there's a lot of sexual diversity. But then that in itself can be confusing for some people. Where do you fit in with that, and when might an addiction to pornography or other sexual activities become quite destructive in your life?
Yes. I mean, I guess it's the same with any addiction, isn't it? You could talk about alcohol,
Yeah.
readily available in stores here in the UK, and you can buy it anywhere. And some people drink recreationally, and some people sadly are addicted to it. You can't live without it. And I guess that sex and porn addiction is on the same level.
Yes, it can be. And, I think it's important for me to say that, I'm not anti-porn or anti-sex workers or anti-adult hookups or webcam or other sexual activity, because everybody has the right to enjoy their sexuality in a way that's right for them. But it's when it becomes problematic that people arrive at my door.
Yeah. And just give us a flavour of the kind of problematic issues that the people who arrive at your door may have.
Well, it can cause a lot of problems in relationships, as you might expect, that, there's a lot of secrecy involved. If you have a partner and sexually acting out, the kind of sex and porn addiction that I work with isn't just like an affair. It's much more chronic than that. And it can impact on people's libido and able to have sex, the pornography means that you become addicted to it, and that real sex and with another live partner doesn't seem to be as interesting anymore. And so it's the pornography that you become addicted to, and so you lose your sexual relationship. It can impact on work. You can be up all night looking at pornography or adult hookups or webcams. You can be exhausted the next day, unable to concentrate and focus. And it can isolate you, and it can impact on your self-esteem and your self-worth.
Yes, and of course with that would be a huge amounts of shame for some people, admitting like they've got an issue with it. I guess like with any addiction, people sometimes are ashamed of it.
Absolutely. And, we'll be looking at all sorts of labels that clients use about themselves, and also that society might use about them, that makes these issues sometimes unspeakable.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's a powerful word you've used, unspeakable, which is something that shouldn't really happen in a therapeutic environment, but I guess sometimes does. This has been so interesting, and I think it's a lecture of our time because of increased internet usage and increased availability of all sorts of materials around human sexuality and sexual kind of preference. Finally, Karen, I wonder what you hope that anybody who watches this lecture may learn from it.
Well, I'm hoping that they will develop the confidence to begin to identify and recognize, what sex and porn addiction is, and in being able to wonder about whether there is sex and porn addiction, how to put the client at their ease, to have a beginning conversation, using the questions that's in the lecture, to help their client be able to talk about it. And it's important to say that the lecture isn't about helping practitioners to work with these issues, because this is a very specialist field. It's simply beginning conversations and supporting their clients to refer them on to assessment. Well,
Karen, I think that is a very powerful set of learning outcomes, and I think, as I say, one that's very timely in the age that we live in. I'm sure that practitioners are going to see more and more clients who may have a sex addiction, or maybe over involved in sex to the point where their normal functioning and their normal lives are interrupted. It's been an absolutely pleasure interviewing you. So, Karen Lawrence, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rory. My pleasure.
Thank you very much to Karen Lawrence. Thank you to Rory for hosting that interview. This has been Counselling Tutor Podcast, episode 203.
Yes, and lots interesting topics. Counselling Foundations, we talked about why ethics are important. We overviewed the heart of our profession, which is ethics. On Focus on Self, we talked about attachment styles and why that's important and how it might impact in practice. And then finally, in Practice Matters, we caught up with the fabulous Karen Lawrence, who gave us an overview of sex addiction and the lecture that she delivered for us. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
If you're a qualified counsellor or psychotherapist, then why not check out the Counsellor CPD Library? Stay current with your CPD requirements with over 150 hours of academically rigorous, on-demand lectures you can stream to your device. Joining Counsellor CPD will expand your skill set to create a more specialised, highly rewarding practice. For more information on the Counsellor CPD library, visit counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.